Welcome to Module 1, Lesson 3. We're talking about buying or starting from scratch. And I know that this is one that a lot of people ask, and I feel like we can get in some interesting places here. So let's start with understanding the business models. What's the biggest difference between starting fresh and buying an existing practice?
Honestly, that comes with revenue. I mean, that is the biggest difference because when you start a practice from scratch, zero revenue, right? When you buy a practice, there should at least be some revenue for you to start with. And that is the biggest difference between the two.
So one thing that we were talking with Dr. Sammy Webb, she's with Epic 4, and she was talking about one of the biggest things now with buying an existing practice is because the OSOs and DSOs, that side of things, it's ramped up the price of buying an existing practice. So that is something to consider when you're going out there and trying to buy and everything. It might be a bigger price tag.
It makes it really difficult, right? It's like because they've overinflated the prices. And when you look at it from a younger orthodontist trying to buy a practice, really the best route to doing that is to work in that practice as an associate, come to some type of agreement with the exiting doctor, and then just purchase it from them. Because if you try to go and approach a normal practice and say, hey, I want to buy your practice, well, that sparks them to think about selling it to someone else, and they sell it to the person who's going to, put the most money up typically.
Yeah, it's all about the money when it really comes down to it. So why would somebody want to have complete control over the start of their practice compared to like buying something like the office culture and all of that?
So I actually love the startup model, right? Because you get full control over every decision from branding to how you align with the community to the patient that you want to see, right? You don't have to deal with the problems that may come with a toxic culture from a place that's been in business for a long time, right? You don't have to get over those sometimes when change is tough for people, right? So you don't have to deal with adopting new technology and people pushing back on you. So I like that, and I like to be able to go in and have a clean slate, right? And say, when you go to your referring doctors, hey, I'm the new guy on the block. This is what we'd like to do. We would love to have the opportunity to treat some of your patients, right? Sometimes if you buy into a practice, you're already kind of ostracized because of who they've dealt with in the past.
Yeah, they might have had a bad experience, or they might have had a good experience, and they don't trust you.
That's right.
But you also can turn it where you are coming in, you already have a well-functioning machine. You're not having to kind of build it from scratch and everything.
There's definitely benefits to that, right? And I think if you go into buying a practice with the mindset of a startup, you will win because you can go in and you can say, all right, this is where this company has done great. But let me bring my own flavor to it. Add that in, be hungry about growing it, and you can see some really nice results. But the thing about the buying a practice is that cash flow, and that is great. The patient population is there, the name recognition is typically there as well. But do know that whenever a doctor changes, there's typically a 10 to 30% change of the patient population. So it's just like, a new person's coming in that some people are like, I'm out because the doctor's been here for 75 years is not here.
Yeah, and I think that's hard. Plus, there might be some turnover with staffing and everything. And just a caveat with everybody, when you take over a practice or any kind of business, always check with the people that are there what worked, what didn't work. Do a lot of listening, a lot of questions. That way you start building a relationship and trust. We talked about that earlier, is like when you get that trust, they're going to go for you all the way. And if you're just coming in there and changing everything, they're going to hate you.
That's right. And I think that's the benefit of being an associate in that practice, right? Because you get to see the inner workings. You get to see the toxic person, right? And it may be a little bit more challenging to let that person go, but still, you get to see the intricacies of the practice from a different light. So if you're going in and you don't know anything about anything, you have to pay attention to all of the little things, like you were saying.
Let's talk about financial considerations with both of these models. Which option costs more upfront, starting or buying?
So it depends. If you're buying a practice that is booming, then you're probably going to pay more for that practice, right? Because you're not only buying the practice, you're buying all of the things that come along with it. You're buying the equipment, you're buying the staff, you're buying the systems, you're buying the patient list, right? You're buying the revenue, right? And so that ends up being a little bit more expensive as far as right out of the gate, right? That has a bigger price tag, right? But now if you buy an unhealthy practice, you might be able to get it for a little discount, right? Yeah. And then when you do a startup, the startup's going to be really heavy on the front end for all the equipment and stuff like that, but your labor costs will be low because you won't have a ton of people, right? But you also have no patients. So you have no money coming in. So it ends up balancing out. But if you're just talking about the overall sticker price, typically the buying of an existing practice is higher.
Yeah, and I feel like you can structure that with the doctor. Some might want, I want the payout now, which is going to be a much bigger ask. Or you could have it where, you know, over a certain amount of time, every month you're going to get X amount of dollars, you know, based on like our percentages and everything until you're up to this amount of money. You know, he might get a big cash at the very beginning and then piece it out like that. That way you're not, you know, $30 million, you know, out the gate.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, it's funny because I've tried to buy several practices that were existing. And every time there's an inflated price that it doesn't necessarily make sense. But it's their prerogative to sell it for whatever they want, right? It's their baby. And so you got to put yourself in a good position to protect your best interests as well.
Why does starting from scratch take longer to make money?
Well, it's because you're starting from zero, right? You're starting with no patients. So you have to convince one patient to come in. Then you have to turn that patient into another patient and another patient. And sometimes whenever you do startups, what people fail to remember is just because you started a $5,000 case doesn't mean you get $5,000 that day. Right? You may get $500 down payment, and then you're going to put them on a payment plan, or you're going to get insurance, and insurance is going to pay you out maybe a lump sum at the beginning, and then pay you a small monthly fee, or they may pay you quarterly, right? So you have to plan for all that. So there's this 1 to 2 year of ramp up before you can consistently make money as an orthodontist.
Yeah, and you would have to scale super fast to really make a ton of money that first year.
That's right. And you don't, and it's weird because you don't actually want every single patient to pay in full at the very beginning. I know that sounds crazy, but you got to think that treatment is going to take between 12 and 24 months. And so if they pay you all that money up front, you're going to be cash flow positive and feel like you're rich. But then for the next, 18, 19 months, you're going to be like searching for more. Right?
Yeah. You're having to manage that money for a longer term.
That's right.
Instead of having that kind of flow, that steady flow through the whole time. Let's talk about risk management, because I know that kind of hits that a little bit. How can someone lower the risk when starting from scratch?
So this is a really cool thing. You can negotiate a lot of different things. You can negotiate with the banks. You can negotiate with your landlord, right? And so if you negotiate with the banks, what I would always recommend is do interest only for the first 12 months, if you can, right? And then I would actually try to do that with the tenant, the landlord as well. So if you do that with the landlord, you say, hey, I want to pay, I'm opening in May. Can you give me 3 months of free rent? Actually, just tack them on to the end. And what ends up happening is they just give you a little bit of runway to get going before all these bills start hitting you, right? And let's say you are super successful. Then you just say, hey, I'll pay you, right?
Yeah.
Or you say, hey, bank, I'm going to pay, right? I'm going to pay more than just the interest, right? But it gives you the ability to kind of set things up to help you if you don't just start booming.
Yeah, you're not in a chokehold at the very beginning because everybody's like, hey, where's my money?
Yep.
And I know Carr is really good with the whole like landlord and like leases and all that, which we'll get more into that later on. So what should people check out before buying a practice? Like what are some like, oh, this is something I need to pay attention to?
Yeah, I think you have to look at the books, right? You have to get clean books. And I tell you what I found is it's very challenging to find clean books. And what I mean by that is when I'm going to buy a practice, a lot of times the doctor has personal expenses tied up in their practice, whether it's a car, whether it's insurance for his whole entire family, whether it is, some student loan repayments or whatever it may be. So you have to find clean books where you have a clear outline of how, what the evaluation of this practice is. I always suggest that you get a third party to look at it, somebody that is looking out for your best interest and can actually go through and look at those numbers to make sure that the purchase price is justified.
You want to take people at their word, but with something like this, when it's costing $30 million or whatever number it is, doesn't matter if it's $10 or $1 million, you want to know what you're getting into and where everything is going. So let's talk about some decision matrix kind of stuff. What matters most to you? And this is for people, control, cost, or quick profits.
This is going to be a balancing act, right?
Yeah.
You want a little bit of everything. So to me, if I'm buying a practice, I want to know how profitable it is, right? Because if we're running at a 10% profitability, then I think I can go in there instantly and get some more profit out of there. I think I can cut some systems, clean up some systems, make it where it's more close to that 20 or 30%, and then you make more money instantly, right? If it's a startup, then you're going to have to really want to value control, because you that's what's going on. You're going to control everything, good or bad. And so, I think that's the dichotomy that you're always going to have to fight. You're going to have to figure out the balance of what's important to you.
So I think it really comes down, when you're deciding this, is like what you feel, which one are you deciding on? It's like, do I want more control? Do I want profits? Do I want, stability? Well, like whichever it feels good for you, I think that's the way you need to go.
Yeah. And I look at some of my colleagues and they've purchased practices and, they're doing X number of dollars and it looks awesome, right? But they also had to struggle through the transition from when the old doc left and when they took over. And so some of those things that you're saying, they didn't have as much control over because the team was running the show.
Yeah.
And so, it's a balancing act.
This is kind of like some self-assessment for y'all. Think about, do you like the idea of building something brand new or fixing something up? Do you, it's like you build houses, and it fix things up. It's like, which one would you rather do?
Yep. I think it's simpler to start from scratch. It is more complex to do a flip, right?
Yeah.
But there's tremendous value in both.
Yeah.
And it all comes down to your personality, your risk assessment, and what you're willing to do. And so I think that's why there's options for everybody out there.
Yeah. The home thing, it's like you might get in there, their pipes are old.
Right. That's right. Just because it looks pretty on the outside don't mean it's pretty.
I love that. And then the last one is, how soon do you want your practice to start making money? I think that's a huge one.
Yeah. And you have to write this down. This is something that you want to write down. Now you have to be realistic, right? Because in my world, I was like, 3 months, we're going to be making money.
Yeah.
No way. We were in COVID. But but the reality of it is, you want to say by year 1, I want to do X number, right? And by year 2, I want to do X number. And then by year 5, I want to do this. You have to have a roadmap. And if you write it down, it is proven that if you write it down, you're more likely to accomplish it.
Yep. You got to set that goal. You got to know where you're going. And that's holding yourself accountable. That goes back to that maturity.
That's right.
That's this module. We'll see you in the next one.